Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third day of HU Talks during this homecoming week. And as it is homecoming week, I wanted to remind you that tickets are on sale for the Cowboy Lounge, which is Friday night at 5:30 to 7:30. And this is our big alumni and community event. Everybody is welcome. Tickets are $20. It's going to be a great dinner and a great evening of connecting with people and having a lot of fun. Our alumni board has been hard at work on this event, and we have a great silent auction featuring many vacation packages and luxury items that you're really going to want to take advantage of getting your bid in on. And all the proceeds raised from this event support student success here at Highlands. So if you're a country music fan, you might be interested. One of the vacation packages includes 2 tickets to the CMAs and kind of a luxury stay in downtown Nashville. So take a look at that if you're interested. And I'm very pleased to introduce our next HU Talk presenter, Dr. Daniel Chadborn. Dr. Chadborn is an assistant professor in psychology and is involved in a number of research projects on fan studies, sense of community, and folklore. This is his 6th year at Highlands. So thank you, Dr. Chadborn. And he's, I think, participated in the HU Talks every year. So we really appreciate him. Please welcome Dr. Chadborn as he presents his HU Talk on the Rebooting the Magic, fan perception of the next generation.
Everyone, yes, let me share my screen. I enjoy doing this every year. It's probably my favorite part of the year. And so I didn't share my screen. I went full screen. This is better. Oh, so I want to, I guess, start. There we go. I want to start by basically offering a disclaimer. I'm not talking about Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm talking about My Little Pony, which is typically what I talk about when I talk about fan communities. So I do apologize for that and any clickbaiting that I did. My goal for this this talk is going to be to kind of talk about some of the research that we've been doing over the last 4 years. I mean, really that we've been doing, I've been doing for the last 12 years, but specifically the last 4 years of research on what happens towards sort of the end of a fan community, and then how it responds to sort of its interest being restarted or rebooted. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the reboot literature and kind of, well, what do we mean by a reboot? How do we define a reboot? Are there other terms for it in the fan studies literature, which kind of overlaps with English and literary studies, with media studies, with communications, with leisure studies? There's a number of different fields that kind of all come together to study media in this way. And then so my research focuses on a particular fan community, that being the predominantly male fan base of the My Little Pony 4th generation, which has now moved to a 5th generation, and the fandom's dealing with that. I'll talk a little bit about sort of the insights from the fan community on the ending of their community or the ending of their show. So what happens when a fan interest ends? And then what are some of their perceptions before this new generation starts? So the next generation of My Little Pony Generation 5 has begun officially last fall 2021, and then officially kind of again in the first season in fall 2022. So what happens prior to that? What do they think about that? And then what happens once it actually does happen? So a lot of the research on reboot media or rebooted media is typically happening kind of post-hoc. So we think of Star Trek or Star Trek: The Next Generation that's happened in the past. And so researchers are kind of looking at it in retrospect. So what happened with these fans? What happened with the fan circuits? What happened with the conventions? What happens with the community? We can see the same with a lot of different fandoms, but we had this sort of golden opportunity to investigate a fandom in the now as it was happening prior to the end of the series, post end of series, prior to the beginning of a new generation, of content. And then as that new generation of content has been going on, and that's kind of what I want to talk a little bit about. We have a lot of data. And we're still trying to ask or answer some of these questions or understand sort of the larger scope of what's going on with identity and with a number of factors. And so I'm going to try to condense some of that data down, some of the qualitative data, some of the quantitative data, and kind of offer some of my insights and where we're going. My colleagues and I are going on this. So let's talk about what a reboot is. So this has probably happened to all of us at least once. Your favorite show has been rebooted, or your favorite show has ended. What now? A lot of shows now are being rebooted. Reboots, nostalgia is sort of a easy sell from a Hollywood perspective. Maybe it's going to happen more. I've heard The Office is about to get a reboot. If you're an Office fan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Maybe you're very upset. So do you have a show or series that you love that has been rebooted? I want you to kind of think about that when we come back to that towards the end. And the question that we have here is like, is this a reboot? Is this an actual reboot of a series? And that's kind of difficult to ask because the literature talks about rebooted series in a number of different ways. They've used requel. So this is a reboot that's also a sequel. So it kind of reboots the narrative of the series. It retells an essential original story, but it's also a sequel. So Star Wars: The Force Awakens is a good example of this. Jurassic World is kind of the preeminent example of this in sort of modern movies, that it not only completely retells the story of a theme park where everything goes awry with genetically recreated dinosaurs, but it is also a sequel. It's part of the kind of, Jurassic Park cinematic universe. Or is it something like a legacy quote, where it's both tied to the legacy, it reimagines, it reinvents, it retells some aspect, it expands on the legacy. Basically anything Star Trek falls within this category. It's a sequel, it's a prequel, it's something new, but it's still sort of within the framework of that show or that world. Even the new J.J. Abrams, J.J. Abrams Star Trek kind of represents this sort of category of a legacy reboot, where it's rebooting things, but it's still in an alternate universe. And so we end up in this kind of odd world where we might not have the cleanest definition for what a reboot is. Or is it something, it's like I said, a legacy prequel. Prequels can also kind of fall within this. So how do you feel about it? Why do we actually do these reboots? I mean, the simplest answer is that it's a money-making strategy. Gregory refers to this as, and I'll talk about Gregory in a second, it's like his habit, that a reboot is sort of tied to the habit of you watching this show before. It's familiar. You're returning to these similar characters. You're returning to something that you don't have to really roll the dice on. It's comfortable. And because it's comfortable for you, it's going to get you in the seat, at least to see the first reboot, or to watch the first season of the rebooted show, which is there to basically make money. I found a 2005, and it's very prescient article on what if movies or what if TV shows were given gritty reboots. And I'm really hoping for the ALF reboot now. We haven't had an ALF reboot yet that I'm aware of, but I'd like to see a gritty, 8-season Netflix show. They cancel after 2 seasons on ALF. They were also really prescient with this because they predicted like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which was actually given a gritty reboot on Netflix. It's been going, I'm not sure if they've canceled it yet. But Gregory kind of talks about this as reboot is ritual, it's habit forming, it's familiar characters, and especially now as we're kind of entering an age where sort of millennials are making money and able to spend time watching stuff and affording stuff, reboots and kind of retellings of these sort of classic 90s, 2000s era shows are becoming more and more and more popular. Here's another crack.com gritty reboot of She-Ra, which We did get a reboot, maybe not as gritty as that, but we still got a She-Ra reboot on Netflix as well. Probably the most preeminent individual in fan studies literature, Henry Jenkins, says that all texts are sort of created from pre-existing material. And so the reboot is just another example of this. So authors, information, script writers, they're getting their information from some sort of pre-existing trope or concept or idea. And they're maybe putting their own spin on it, but they're still pulling from pre-existing information. And so the reboot is kind of a explicit hyper example of this thing, where we're taking something pre-existing, typically currently pre-existing or very recently pre-existing, and we're seeing it sort of rebooted in new and different ways. And so he defines it as explicit, identifiable, and familiar history that we're taking this information from. Urbanski, who wrote a book on rebooting fan material or media material, describes it as kind of a reinvention. Urbanski describes, watching the prequel trilogy with I think it was their nephew, and their nephew's watching R2-D2 and has no context as to who R2-D2 is. But them watching the sort of prequel trilogy, watching Star Wars Episode 1, when they see this little droid go and save the Naboo ship and say, oh, that's R2-D2, that's its classification. They can watch it, Urbanski can watch it and go, oh, this is great. This is like, I know this character has a history, but for their nephew, it's new. And if their nephew were then to watch the original trilogy, R2-D2 has a very different history and understanding. And so this sort of idea of the reboot is not only pulled from the information that we know, but it changes and sort of, in some cases, manipulates the information that we have about the characters and whatnot that we're watching. It changes the context of earlier narratives because of this. And so if we kind of want to pan to a definition, I'll read you this one from Verivas 2017, probably the most comprehensive definition I was able to find that I liked. It's a process of restarting, remaking, or re-commercializing a film, property, or franchise by denying or nullifying earlier iterations in order to, quote, begin again without requiring any knowledge of previous media or films or information. So this sort of true reboot involves starting something new, allowing new people to join it, which can be more accessible for new fans. It's harder to get into a fandom or get into a show when there's like 8 episodes. I still need to watch Breaking Bad at some point. It's hard. That means I have to watch all of Breaking Bad, and I might not have time to do so. Every time someone recommends a show to me, I feel that way. But if they were to reboot something, maybe it'd be easier for me to get into it at the ground floor. So I can only imagine what Breaking Bad fans would think if they rebooted Breaking Bad. They started it over, there's a new Walter White, I don't know what would happen. And so the question is, like, can we just let something die? From a commercial and media standpoint, the answer is no. For a lot of fans, the answer might be no, because we want to see our interests continue. We don't want our shows to end. But sometimes maybe they should. And we've actually looked into that. We both the earlier literature on fan culture and some of our research has sort of quantitatively examined what's called fan euthanasia. And it's sort of, maybe it's time to sort of, put the show down before it gets worse. We don't want this to go on for 22 seasons where things just get crazier and crazier. I watched Supernatural, for instance, when it first came out, and that was definitely a show that could have died in like season, I don't know, some people might argue season 2, but it definitely went on to a point where it just kind of got a little more absurd every time. So what did we do? I've been studying the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic fan community since about 2011, 2012. It started in 2011. It had a 7-season run. Some of those seasons were split. Some of the fans refer to it as 9 seasons based on like the half seasons that they got. And it ended in 2019. The fan base are typically defined as bronies. So it's a portmanteau of bro and ponies. It was developed on internet message boards in early 2010s, 2011, 2012. And I've been studying this fandom since the beginning. So we're at about 12-ish years of research with them. And so in 2019, we had the opportunity, thanks to the research committee here at Highlands, to go to Baltimore to kind of look at the end. 2019, we heard that the show was going to end. We went to the last BronyCon, the last big fan convention. There were about 10 to 15,000 attendees. And we wanted to see, how do they feel about this? How do they feel about the last major fan convention? How do they feel about the future end of their interest? And then in 2021, we heard rumors of a new show. And so we kind of immediately jumped into gear. We put an initial survey together, and for the next 3 years or two and a half years, we were collecting data on the community. So we asked some pre-series and post-series information and questions at the last BronyCon. About 710 participants, about 250 of them, because we could only ship so many printed surveys to Baltimore, which the post office almost lost. And so we collected them from Baltimore, the Baltimore Convention Center online. Most of our research showed that there were no real differences in a lot of like fan identity or reported quantitative data between the participants online and the participants attending the convention, which is kind of interesting. Usually we would expect some difference, but the fans seem to be pretty high in their identity. And it was likely to be very salient at the front of their mind at the time, because this was the last major convention. There are still conventions going on. There are several every year. They're just not sort of the last big hurrah, as BronyCon had been going on since the beginning, fall of 2011. My colleagues, Pat Edwards and Marcia Redden, both attended that initial convention to present some of their early data on the fandom. In 2021, we collected about 800 participants. There were some rumors. Internet message boards were blowing up. This actual timeline, which is definitely not in English, is pretty accurate. We've seen beginning of a new show, the movie in fall 2021, the beginning of a new show, season 1 in 2022. They actually moved that to like fall of 2022. I think the second half of the season started this summer. And so we've actually seen this sort of playing out. Information on new toys, all of that gets released, all of it gets leaked all over these internet message boards, including 4chan, which, as interesting of a message board as it is, it does have one of the first My Little Pony boards. And so they're still actually talking and communicating about the show on there. I don't recommend going there, but that's where we're seeing a lot of these early leaks happen. We also see some early mock-ups of the new logo, which is definitely different from the old logo. And so we decided to jump into action. We start collecting data. We see participants online from Equestria Daily, which is one of their big news sites, and on Reddit. And this becomes the first point of our longitudinal study. We then collected more data after the movie in fall 2021. And so all repeat participants, we actually collected more. We had about 500-600 participants worth of data, but 250 of them had actually taken the first survey. And so we combined them to make the second point of this longitudinal study. And then the third point, only 161 kept. We did have a couple drop out. We had a couple reach out to us for a number of different reasons. I'll kind of talk about that a little bit. But these, again, are all repeat participants. It's about 250 total, but 161 had previously taken the survey. And this was from Equestria Daily. And then we had email contact. So we've been collecting information to reach out to them to take more. And so this was post season 1, or at least post part of season 1. So we asked at the beginning, hey, have you seen this? If you have, please continue the survey. If you haven't, come back and take it later. Now, obviously, we're seeing declines in data collection. We kind of expect some drop off with longitudinal studies. In this case, I also expect it having to do with the fan community dropping off. The Bronies are kind of a unique community in fandom, is that over the course that we've been studying them, they've kind of only declined. Every fan community loses members over time, but typically those communities take in new members because of new consistent content. Bronies have been a lot of fans at the beginning, and while they do take in a couple of participants year to year, a couple and there's still like millions of fans. A couple year to year, we still see a drop off as that moves forward, where they're not completely replenishing their numbers. A lot of our kind of age, I've got here, what I had, age and all of these, but a lot of our age at sort of about 26, these were 16, 17, 18-year-olds when the fandom started. And so they've kind of been with it since the beginning. There are some fans that started a little later, but we're definitely seeing fans sticking around more within this community than we see with some of our other community studies with like anime fans, for example, which are pretty cyclical. People drop off, people join in for a number of different reasons. So we had some questions about this. We thought it was an optimal opportunity to talk with the fandom in real time. We wanted to see if they had some sort of acceptance of the end. I was really thinking about framing this whole presentation in like the stages of grief and seeing, all right, how do we deal with that? Is there some denial? Is there some acceptance towards the end? But really, fans were kind of all over the place. And I'll sort of talk about that with some of our qualitative data. We do tend to see, though, that there is sort of that hope, really up until season 1 of the show. There was a lot of hope and positive speculation about what was going to happen with the fan community. And that's kind of an interesting take too, because if we're studying, let's say, fans in retrospect, the Star Trek fans in retrospect are fans still. They're the fans that stuck around, or the fans that are continuing to stick around. Star Wars fans today are either, the ones on Twitter don't talk to, but the ones that are, working with surveys and helping with interviews are the ones that are kind of sticking with it. They may not want to talk about Rise of Skywalker, but they're still with the fan community. They're still fans. And if we were to study them 20 years in the future, we're going to lose all the ones who are like, yeah, I'm leaving Star Wars for good at this point. And so being able to sort of see what fans are engaging in. We also wanted to see if the perceptions of the reboot actually matched up to reality. So you have this perception of what the show is going to be like. What happens once the show occurs? Do we see a drop in engagement? Do we see a drop in identity? Do we see someone leaving the community? And that may be what we're seeing. We'll have to look at some of the broader models, which I'm not really going to go into in this talk, to see if there is something there as to why we're seeing this drop off. Are the fans that are responding in this latest survey different from the fans who were responding in spring of 2021? We'll kind of show you it does seem to be that way. The kinds of responses we're getting are very different. And really, are we seeing these sort of trends as we move from the end of a show to new beginnings? How are fans responding? How are fans engaging? Who is taking the survey compared to maybe who was before? So I'm going to go through some of this kind of quick because I have a lot of slides and we don't have a ton of time. I'd like to get to make sure we have time for some questions. I will have all of these slides on our website. You can go to Brony Study Psychology. It's a Google site. So if you Google Brony Study Psychology, Brony Study Research or Brony Study Psychology, you should be able to find us. I think there's a link at the end. I'll make sure that there's a link on our slides so that you can get access if you want to read some of these. And I've kind of selected, I don't want to give you all 700 qualitative data points. We'd be here forever. So typically what I saw in kind of analyzing this data is that there was about a 50-50 split between hope and positivity. Basically people saying that I hope the show sets a good precedent. It hasn't quite hit them yet, but they're optimistic. They want to see the community continue. It's this kind of bittersweet mix where there is this hope, the show had a good run. I don't want to see it get worse. but I'm really excited what the future holds for our community. And actually, this is pretty consistent in what we kind of expect to see I'm going to go back a second. We also asked them, what's just their sort of level of involvement with the community, and this is kind of one of those fan perceptions. And I will say this is pretty consistent with what we do end up seeing, though we're only tracking it to about the 2 or 3 year mark. And so we typically see that the fan community builds throughout the seasons. It's kind of plateaued. There's a little dip, but we see that their kind of projection of like, how involved do you expect to be in the next 10 years with the fandom? They're still saying fairly involved, but not nearly as much. They're expecting to drop off a little bit as new content ends. And as I'll kind of show you with actual engagement, this sort of projection of some involvement tends to hold true. So additionally, they're not only saying that they're hopeful for the future, they're hoping the fandom picks up and moves forward in a positive way. There's a lot of sadness and a lot of nostalgia for the original show, which still hadn't had its 9th or its 7th season at this point, its last season. So they're still waiting for that. It hasn't really sunk in that it's going to be the end. They're hoping that that ending is going to stick the landing well. They're hoping that they can maybe end, the showrunners can end on their own terms. And there are a lot of fans, one fan in particular said, like, I hope it doesn't end up like, I'm glad it's ending now because I don't want it to end up like The Simpsons. 20 plus seasons in, this sort of decline in quality from a lot of Simpsons fans. No one criticizes The Simpsons more than Simpsons fans. And we kind of see the same thing with the Bronies, that they're almost happy that the show is kind of ending on their own terms, that it's not going to be this sudden cutoff, or that it doesn't go on for 10 more years. And this is probably an acceptance thing. You kind of tell yourself, no, it's good that it's ending because I have no control over it. It's better that it's ending now. So this is my fan euthanasia quote. We actually collected data on this. We asked a bunch of fans these questions about, is it better for a show to end? Like, even though you're really attached to it, even though you love it, you kind of want it to end because it could just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And there are a lot of fans who will nostalgically move into the early seasons of the show as sort of the peak of quality. And we'll say yeah, season 7 and 8 was getting, or season 6 and 7, years 7 and 8 were getting a little iffy. We're glad that it's ending now. We want to kind of see it finish. And as we moved into spring 2021, we reached out and we asked them, what do you think is going to happen? We had sort of 5 core questions as sort of our longitudinal 1, 2, and 3. And they were sort of, what do you think the new movie is going to be like? And then we asked them, what did you think of the new movie? What did you think of the new season? What do you think the new season's going to be like? There were a lot of predictions, positive predictions. If I asked them, do you have any thoughts? They said, nope, just like ponies. I'll just keep watching ponies as long as there are ponies. A lot of people had sort of positive things. This is probably my favorite one. It'll probably be great, but the fandom will hate it all, which is, we'll get there. We'll get there when we get there. There were perceptions of characters where they saw sort of the early artwork and the names and the information from these characters and said, I think I'm going to like this character the best based on the characters that I liked from the earlier generations. That is something we actually collected originally as well. We've collected favorite character over time. We've also tracked to see if that favorite character has shifted to some of the new characters in the new show and movie. For the vast majority of fans, it hasn't. They're kind of still sticking with their favorite character. And again, you can think about that, and they've had 7 seasons to build up their love of a particular character. That doesn't really going to change with a half or 1 season of a new show. So there's a lot of hopeful optimism, and a lot of fans were like, yeah, it's too early to tell. We're not sure. There were some fans that did represent kind of an early rejection. So they were engaging in nostalgia. I'm not really interested in watching this new show. I'm just going to watch reruns of the old show. One of the things that I really found interesting with looking at the spring 2021 data was that there were a lot of fans that were worried that it was too political. And this is very ironic. The show has always had kind of a high feminist edge to it. It's a show about colorful ponies. There are very few male characters. And a lot of them in spring of 2021 were really worried about the political climate of the show, despite the fact that the show's always kind of had this sort of social justice angle to it. What's also really funny is that in the latest study, we've actually had fans contact us directly and drop out because we asked them about their political leanings. So because of some of these comments, we went in and said, all right, let's actually get their perception. Do you think this new movie was too political or quote unquote woke? And they give it, some of us would give honest answers, some of them would give honest answers, and some of them would be like, I don't appreciate you asking us these questions. And so it definitely seemed that like us trying to tap into what's going on here really affected some of the fans. There's a whole another series of questions tied to that. But there were fans that were like, hey, with everything going on in the world, maybe it should address some of these issues. And it's not political enough. We should have more political stories. We should have more real world application. We should have more moral and ethical lessons, which is kind of what the entire show was originally based on. These sort of moral or ethical Aesops, these tales that were told through these episodes, because it's a show for kids, you know, and these are like 26-year-olds commenting on like whether or not the show has gotten too political over time. But again, we still see this sort of hopes of the future. I'm not going to say that the political stuff was a majority, but there was definitely certain clusters of fans that, you know, out of that 700 initial points of data collected, that were definitely clustered around this sort of political leaning idea. But they still show this hope. Like the new movie has not come out. They're still hopeful for the future. So what happens fall of 2021? The new movie happens. Everyone's pretty happy with it for the most part. The animation's really good. It's a movie, so Netflix has spent money on it. Animation's really good. They got some quality voice actors and famous people to sort of do some of the voice work on it. Pretty good quality, and so the fans responded naturally pretty well to it. Now, it was tempered in a way. You know, someone said nostalgia and happiness and hope for the new series is how they felt for it. So it tickled that nostalgia itch for them. The ones who criticized it still tempered it with positivity. So it was like, yeah, it was a bit boring, it's pretty basic, but it was still good. I liked it. It was predictable, but immensely fun. It was cute, but I missed the old ponies. Like I liked it, but there were things I didn't like about it. So even the bad was like pretty good. So there was this, again, additional hope, but it was going to be another year before we saw anything new. So when this last season, or when this first season of the new show comes out, I'm not sure if, I mean, Hasbro wants to continue it. I think if Hasbro wants to put the money into it, we'll get more. Some fans were still optimistic, but we start seeing far more critical or criticisms about the content. Animation quality declines, it's a little jankier. We tend to see a decline in voice acting because they got rid of all the expensive stars and they brought in less expensive voice actors. And so we tend to see a difference in that kind of quality. Like someone says, not something that they can get obsessed for. So even again, that positivity is like, yeah, I'm probably not gonna like watch it 100 times like I have the original series. The budget cuts were quite noticeable, as I mentioned. They're trying too hard to appeal to a new generation of kids. It's very disappointing. Hasbro historically produces garbage for marketing reasons, which, I mean, yeah, some call fallacy, which is maybe what we're seeing with some of the fans who are sticking around. And some of them, which was unlike every other survey we asked, occasionally we'd have one or two people with very intense feelings. The people who took the participants who took the last survey for us had very intense feelings. Like how they wanted to throw one of the characters, Sparky, into the sun. People who like this garbage are the people who don't want to accept that friendship is magic is over. And probably the most extreme one when we asked about the music, what did you like about the music? And they're like, nothing. and it was just expletives. This is the nicer part of their response. And so as we're kind of reaching kind of the true acceptance that friendship is magic, the fourth generation is fully replaced and over. Our fans are much less happy. They're not engaging, and we're probably also seeing that with the decline in the responses that we're getting. Now, what can I kind of take from all this? That's just the qualitative stuff. I'll go over a little bit of some of what we've tracked over time. We looked at engagement. So are you actually engaging with the community? We looked at motivation. So what actually motivates them to be a member of the community? So those fans that are sticking around, is that changing at all? We also looked at 3 aspects of collective psychological constructs: group feelings of nostalgia, temporal orientation, so thinking about the past, thinking about the present, thinking about the future. So what are they focused on more? And then also this sort of collective angst, this anxiety about the future of their fan community. So how much were they engaging in that? Obviously, again, there are limitations to this. We are looking at 4 points of time. Only 3 of those are tracking the same fans, the same exact fans over time. But just to kind of give you a basic overrun, we typically saw the blue line is the highest point. This is when the last BronyCon was going on. And then we kind of have these different points of data, their prediction of what would happen. And then that was also collected. So it's like prediction of the future, what's going to happen in the future, and then what actually happened. And so we actually see that for predictions, we're a little lower for a lot of cases, except for the way I think it's purchasing. I'm sorry, the display of fan items. So basically, fans are still engaged to some extent. It is declining. It is a little higher than they predicted it would be in the spring or the summer of 2019. Except for the display. The fans who were like, no, I'm gonna still wear my merchandise. I'm still gonna wear my shirts. I'm still gonna display that I'm a fan of this show. And the reality is that no, not as much as they thought they would. Their reasons for being a part of the fan community hasn't really changed all that much. There are some differences I think I need to play around with some of the modeling on. But we're not really seeing why they're a fan change. So the ones who are fans, and this is again likely because they're probably still clinging to the 4th generation. They're fans of the 4th generation of the series. They're not fans, or they don't have to be fans of the 5th generation to still be fans of the show. Much like the older collectors of toys, who typically refer to themselves differently than the bronies. They're collectors, they're predominantly female, they grew up with the show. It doesn't really change their interest in the fandom that there's this new show. I mean, they might react to it a little differently, but they can cling and they can hold on to that kind of nostalgic interest. We do see differences with collective nostalgia. They weren't really nostalgic that summer because there was still more show to come, but it definitely boosts once there's talk and the new movie comes out. And I think that's sort of where that hope is, that hey, we can be nostalgic about the old fandom, we can look at these past things. And then we kind of see similar things with temporal orientation. How they think about the past, present, and future. Most of them are still very focused on the present compared to the others. I kind of move through because I realize what time it is. Collective angst has actually gone down. And maybe that's where some of that acceptance is, though. I mean, we're seeing about a point difference. There's probably statistical significance there, but I need to do that's the big limitation here. I need to do some additional analysis on this. And for the most part, we're not seeing that big of a drop in social identity, though usually for fans, we're typically seeing in the 5 to 6 point range when we do these studies. And so dropping below 5 is not necessarily something I'd expect in a fan community that's still growing strong, that's thinking about their interest in the community. So what do I take from this? Basically, the old show is dead, but long live the old show. I think that's what's going to maybe happen with the Office reboot. The Office may have not have any more episodes, but I'm just going to keep rewatching The Office if that's what I like. For the fans, at the very least, Hasbro hasn't sort of replicated the magic of Generation 4 of My Little Pony. They might know it. Hasbro is still marketing stuff from Gen 4. There's a new Magic the Gathering set for Generation 4 My Little Pony. It doesn't involve anything from the new show. They're marketing to older fans, older customers. The fandom still endures, and to an extent, they're still very prominent on their websites, but it is a shrinking fandom, and it is a fractured fandom. It's a fandom that's not nearly as engaged as it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But there are fans that are still meeting at conventions. There are still fans that are engaging in fan art and engaging in online communities to a high degree. It's just not as big as it was. And really with like Hasbro replicating the magic, I don't know if they can again. The Bronies are this sort of weird flash in the pan community that grew out of a show that I don't think anyone was expecting the community that exists to have grown out of. And so it's been very interesting doing research with them over the last couple of years, last decade plus at this point. And it's been very kind of interesting and bittersweet as well, because I'm sort of asking myself the question that Brony study itself might be over. Like, if the fandom is truly ending. We had a lot of limits with our data collection, especially our last point. We couldn't get in touch with Equestria Daily. I tried repeatedly. Normally, they're very eager to assist us. I'm not sure why. Maybe they don't want to talk to us anymore. Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe they're just too busy with the amount of content and information that they're getting in terms of submissions and whatnot. But it has severely limited our ability to collect data from the fans directly if we can't post on their #1 fan site. And I'm not sure how much this might apply to other communities. I do know a lot of millennials are really getting into Bluey, which does make me see some of the parallels with My Little Pony, but I'm not really sure if Bluey is going to be, are we going to see Bluey conventions? Maybe not, but we might see Bluey, and we are seeing Bluey at current My Little Pony conventions. So it has been adopted as sort of this positive show with good vibes, and that's attracted a lot of people who kind of live in an uncertain and disorganized world. I don't think, not Bluey, but like Gen Zers Gen Zers are still kind of like flocking to Bluey in a way that I saw like millennials and whatnot flock to My Little Pony. So will there be another? I'm not sure. We have so much fan content, it's very difficult, but I wanna move through so that I can open the floor for questions. So this is our website, google.com/Brony Study Research. If you Google Brony Study Research, you should be able to find it. I posted these slides up there as well if you'd like to get your hands on them. But yeah, so I'll open the floor. Here, let's stop sharing. Yeah, so here I am. Sorry, I kind of ran through that a little fast, but thank you. Yes, Rebecca.
How is my audio? Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I really enjoyed that, Dr. Chadborn. So I'm a lit person here. A lot of what you were saying about, analyzing like the literary value of this or the storyline was interesting. The question that I am kind of stuck on is, do you think that there's important difference between an animated show versus like a live action show in the terms of developing a fandom?
I don't know. I mean, maybe the animated show makes it easier because you don't have to worry about maybe people getting hung up on casting. I mean, that's become a fan circle, like a toxic fan circle issue over the last decade or so. Criticisms on casting, this person doesn't look like me, and so I don't like them. And so especially maybe with a reboot, though, I mean, I know that there was a lot of fan pushback with the My Little Pony, the Equestria girls. They did kind of a humanized version of the characters. I mean, the fans, I think, embraced it, not as much as they did the original show, but it was definitely looked at as like, oh, this is different animation styles, a little weirder. I think over time they embraced it because it was kind of the same characters, but in a different context. But like animation would make that easier to do. It's just that it has to be kind of good animation, and I think that's what worked for My Little Pony. That's one of the things that a lot of our studies have kind of pointed to, even when we show it to non-fans, is that they really like the animation. They like the animation, they like the music, the quality is really good. That's one of the biggest detractors of the new show because it's in CG. And so like CGI animated ponies is a little iffier. And if it's not done well, like we can do good CGI stuff, but you know, if it still looks like it did with that Reboot example, that old Reboot show, if anyone remembers that, I remember that. It's very bad, but very early CGI. And it kind of worked for that show because we didn't know what we didn't have good examples of it. So yeah, maybe I think it depends. I think the Ahsoka show is like a requel, like well, it's not really a reboot, it's a true sequel. I think it's done a great job with live action casting from the animated Rebels show. But there are fans who are still like, that's not my Ahsoka. Because the animation is kind of what sticks with them. But I don't know. I try to avoid Star Wars fans. So. Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I guess that gives me a follow-up question then. These shows where the writers know that there's like a virulent fan community, are you aware of writers like reaching out to do like beta testing with reboots, like character design, animation, anything like that? That really makes sense what you were saying about casting for the live action show. That makes tons of sense.
Yeah. I mean, I'd imagine Dave Filoni doesn't talk to the fans that much. Maybe he does. I don't know. I think you have companies will do like leaks to see. But to be honest, I don't think there's that much forethought into some of that. I mean, my personal conspiracy theory is that they don't actually think about any of this stuff. I do know the My Little Pony show writers would attend conventions. They would throw in little nods in the show. There's a cameo by a very David Tennant looking pony that had been labeled Dr. Hoobs by the fan community for a long while because he had a little hourglass mark, and they kind of ran with it in an episode. They did a whole episode where it was just nods to the community, like the fans, the adult fans of the show. So it was still very kid friendly, but it was sort of a slice of life episode, which just had a bunch of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like we see you fandom. This is for you. But I don't think any of that was like beta tested, where they were like reaching out to fans. I think what we see with like the political questions is that fans don't necessarily know what they want. And so a company is not really going to reach out to them. And that fans are very divided on a lot of things. There are examples though of movies, of shows that because of pushback have changed things. The new Sonic movie, the first one, changed animation after like the first trailer dropped, and they got so much negative feedback. They fixed Sonic to make it look, and make him look more like Sonic. So there are examples of them responding, but I'm not sure about like beta testing their ideas with fans. I know for Star Trek, there are a lot of Star Trek fans animators who went to work on like Lower Decks and stuff. I follow a bunch of the animators on social media. And so I do see that like they bring their love into that. I know that like Dave Filoni and a lot of the Star Wars showrunners are longtime Star Wars fans. I know this because I recognize one of the episodes of Rebels is tied to a tabletop role-playing game from like the 80s. There's a module and they named it, and the basic beats of the plot are the same as the module. I've played it, so I'm that much of a nerd. but I was able to recognize that. I was like, oh, like these guys are hardcore fans. And so there might be that, like the fans are now writing the shows. Crystal asked, during the research, you're able to explore attachment. My critique with a reboot is usually the choice of actors they choose to play with the characters. Benefit I feel with the reboot is being able to feed our inner child if the show is nostalgic. Yeah, we're definitely, and I've got some data on attachment to characters. Have they switched their favorite character? So if you switch your favorite character, maybe the attachment isn't as strong. A lot of the perceptual stuff of like how they feel about the new show compared to the old show. We asked a lot of perceptual questions. Do you think it's going to be as good? And while we're not like specifically looking at like the broad construct of attachment, there are a lot of these factors that we're examining. And I think I would agree with you that that's definitely part of it. The fans are attached to these original shows and original characters. I mean, that's why even like in the new movie, in the new show, there are nods to Generation 4. Like they're putting little things